2 enforcement squads, and we did have a fully staffed investigation unit at that time.
How are things now, today?
Well, today, so the first year when I was back, we actually lost our B squad. That was one of our traffic enforcement units. And so we had one for a full year. And then last January, we lost the second. And then we also went down from 6 to 7 officers in investigations to just 2.
DC Bolton, did you ever spend time in traffic?
I have not. Always wanted to ride the motorcycle and have that fun job, and it's unfortunate that we don't have that option and availability for other officers, at least in their near future now. But as a supervisor and commander, what I quickly realized and through my meetings and time with community members and groups is that the role of a traffic enforcement officer is extremely important in terms of their ability to focus in on traffic safety issues, work and coordinate with where accidents are occurring. Always have been a resource of when we have neighborhood councils with complaints about traffic safety issues, being able to turn to somebody in Special Operations Division and with traffic enforcement training, be able to use LiDAR, special tools, time, focuses, and equipment that better focus in on traffic safety for all of Oakland.
Traffic safety is a big issue. I know things have changed within the last 2 years. Lieutenant Thomason, we were talking about it beforehand. Fatalities.
Mm-hmm.
Fatalities are a major thing that happens on our roadways. Can you go into that and where we are in the numbers?
Yeah, this year we usually average around 30 fatalities a year. That doesn't count about the call-outs. Call-outs are usually about 40 to 45 call-outs.
What does that mean, call-outs?
Call-outs. So anytime there's a critical accident that takes place in Oakland where the injuries are very severe, the watch commander will call out our call-out traffic team and to go out there and do the full investigation. So right now we do average around 30, fatals a year, but there's more call-outs than fatals.
And are hit and runs an issue as well?
Yeah, and that's just like with any of our accidents. Like in Oakland, we average around 5,000 reported accidents a year, and around 40% of those are hit and runs. And that's the same for fatality accidents. We do see when there's a severe accident that happens in Oakland that people will do a hit and run and take off, and that's when we do call out our teams and they will try to find the person that's responsible.
I know a lot of people, Chief Bolton, we've been having these conversations towards solutions with the chief, and a lot of people are talking about traffic and enforcement. There isn't a dedicated traffic enforcement right now, or there is?
There is not a dedicated unit or squad. You've heard the term squad. That's essentially 8 officers and a sergeant. There's no dedicated full-time traffic enforcement unit in Oakland. However, we do have focuses on traffic enforcement, and we can go into how we are trying to bridge that gap. But it is undeniably true and unfortunate that it seems that we've had kind of a perfect storm of issues, right? I think everybody driving on any roadway, probably nationwide, during pandemic times has realized that lighter traffic has at least correlated with some really dangerous driving, speed being one of those main driving collision factors. And it just so happened to correspond with also rises in serious crime and violence and reduced staffing, not only reduced staffing, but reduced staffing for the specialized officers that focus in on traffic enforcement safety. So what we've, and I don't know if you wanted to go into it now, but what we're trying to do with Acting Lieutenant Thomason's help, our partnership with the Department of Transportation, our area captains, is finding and utilizing time when available to be as efficient and proactive as possible.
We'll get to that part in a second. Just
Go
hold on
ahead.
to that. But I think I want to explain to people, why isn't there a dedicated detail right now? Is it because of the number of officers that we've lost, or is it other reasons?
There's a few different variables, but I mean I guess the easiest way I can explain that is that right now we have 792 positions that we could in theory fill. That's even a low from where we used to be historically, around 802 officers. But from those 792 positions, we have right now 55 frozen positions. That gives us an authorized strength of 737 positions, of which, as of today, we're only able to fill 682. Those numbers require us to make decisions on where officers are most needed. So that's everything from investigations, but the backbone of any police department is patrol. We were forced to make a decision to reduce the traffic enforcement squads as a city in order to have enough officers in patrol, investigations, and other critical units.
And Lieutenant Thomason, that's your bread and butter there. You work in the traffic division. Is it difficult? Because, I mean, as a person that drives through Oakland, or a lot of residents see people just zipping through and doing lawlessness and even passing officers at time. What is that about? And why isn't there that stop?
Well, it's very difficult. So you have traffic enforcement where you have dedicated officers that go out there and focus on those vehicles and issue citations and corrective behavior. But when you have patrol officers out there, they're tied to 911 calls, and that's what we want them to do. At any time, you have 50 to 100 calls standing where you have citizens call in, and they're expecting an officer to respond. And when patrol officers are going to those calls, we don't expect them to make that stop. We want them to go and contact that citizen and, take the report or find out what their issues are.
Is there a way that some people wonder if you can do both? It's a little upsetting, some people would say, seeing an officer there, watching someone blow a red light or going past them, but it's that weight that you have to do. You're responding to something else, but please both.
Yeah, well, I'll just reiterate that we're really asking for 3 types of stops, and any stop where an officer feels that there is that traffic safety or public safety is being actively jeopardized and a stop is necessary, appropriate, and can be safely done, we are directing officers to make those types of stops. But it is often a balancing act of where, am I covering another officer? Am I responding to a priority call? What is the consequence of doing that traffic enforcement stop that can take anywhere from 15 minutes for a very basic traffic stop, including report time, to even more time, 30 or more minutes, depending on the results or the disposition of that stop. It is also very frustrating. There's a human aspect to that too, is where officers are going to where they're being directed, where they're needed, and then they see something so egregious that there's that pull to want to pull somebody over, but the reality is that there are consequences associated potentially with doing that. That is why we are attempting to make more time or identify time where we can have a focus on traffic enforcement safety. That could be on grant-funded overtime shifts. I think Acting Lieutenant Thomason will talk a little bit about the importance of that funding. And then our area captains citywide are actually developing operations with existing patrol officers, using some of the experience from the former motor officers, traffic enforcement officers, to assist with these operations. But how can we build time when we have extra quote unquote extra officers to focus in on those types of operations? How can we do so with as much precision and as much value as possible?
So Thomason, so there's no dedicated, but there are officers out there still doing the job because it's something that's needed, and a lot of that is also done through overtime and grants.
Yeah, every year we do get an officer traffic safety grant. And it gives us a certain amount of funds that will put officers out there on overtime. And it's around 50 extra operations a year. And so this year the grant ended in September. We're expecting the other one to pick up in November. And then we'll start with our operations where we're putting officers out there. And it goes from just traffic enforcement to DUI enforcement to texting while driving. So there's specific operations. There's also a PED operation. So we'll go out there and try to cite vehicles that are not yielding to pedestrians that are crossing the street. So those 50 to 60 operations are very crucial for the Oakland Police Department, especially when we don't have a dedicated traffic unit.
And again, is that funding tied to, we hear a lot about, how many officers are at the department. Is that funding tied to that?
No. It's already set. We're already awarded this grant for this next year, so 2022. I will be going to City Council this next month to accept the funds, and hopefully we'll be able to start the operations.
Talking about the city, we said we're working collectively with DOT and other agencies to fill in where we can in these kind of situations, because OPD is not just saying you can do what you want and we're not going to do anything. There are things that you're doing, and Chief Bolton, you were saying.
Yeah, so that is an important partnership, and I'll even say that we're not only working with the Department of Transportation, but we're also working with the city's race and equity department as well, because we're critically aware that in the past, not just in Oakland but nationwide, that traffic stops are also associated with negative contacts in the community. We definitely don't want to leave the perception or have a reality that we are over-policing certain neighborhoods, that we're conducting arbitrary stops that could be seen as harassing. We've listened and we understand those concerns. So for a number of years, starting with our work with Stanford University and Dr. Eberhardt, we're not only looking at how traffic stops can impact community for sometimes the worse, other times for the better. We're understanding how our operational focus, the reasons why we're deploying officers, the severity of those offenses, the traffic collision data, where those collisions are occurring, how we're training and instructing officers on those stops. What we see with really well-rounded traffic enforcement safety is actually less racial disparity, more value in terms of being able to say that that officers were on that particular corridor. The city refers to those as high injury networks. So we're collecting that data, understanding where those collisions are occurring, where and how we can put officers in there, and not only just officers, but officers with a good mindset to actually bring value and benefit and relief to those communities, rather than being seen as arbitrary or not needed.
And Lieutenant, the chief said something about high injury networks. What does that mean, and how is it determined?
Well, it's determined from the injury accidents that are occurring in Oakland, injury and fatal accidents. And the Department of Transportation will do a study, and they'll find out where these are occurring. And they'll give us a list of streets throughout the city, and they're from West Oakland all the way to East Oakland. And before each operation, grant operation, we'll go over that with officers. This is your direction. You're going to be on this street for this operation. And we want you to focus on our top primary collision factors that are happening, the reasons why collisions are occurring. And usually it's going to be speeding, unsafe change of course, or failure to yield to pedestrians.
Can you identify some of those high injury networks where there's focus, or do you just want to leave that out of it?
No, it's online, and there are main thoroughfares throughout the city. And just to name a couple offhand, it's going to be International Boulevard, Bancroft, 73rd Avenue. And then if you go to West Oakland, you got Mandela Parkway and some other cities throughout, or streets throughout.
And DOT, are they doing anything different? Are they looking at designing streets differently? Are they doing with that in conjunction with OPD?
Yeah, absolutely. We both can talk to that, but go ahead.
Yeah, and when a fatality happens in the city of Oakland, we do work with the Department of Transportation, our city Department of Transportation, where we will meet with them after this occurs. So a couple days after, once we are able to gather the preliminary information, the sergeant in the traffic unit will meet with city personnel, and they'll go over the circumstances of that traffic accident to see if there's things that can be improved on that roadway. Maybe the timing of the lights need to be changed, or maybe the roadway design needs to be changed. And the Department of Transportation will do a study and make that determination.
I think, well, Sideshow, I think is probably one of the most often received complaints, and that obviously involves very dangerous driving behavior and practices. But our partnership with Department of Transportation is sort of multi-pronged in that we're looking at where Sideshow is predictable. We're meeting with those residents. We're evaluating those roadways. And really the goal of traffic enforcement and really law enforcement should be that we don't want to have to carry out consequential behavior. We don't necessarily want to issue citations or make arrests. How can we help solve problems without needing consequential behavior? That's where the partnership with DOT is so important, and I think we have some good examples to begin with about how roadways have been designed differently in hopes of deterring sideshow activity. The same kind of things happen with speed corridors and along those high injury networks.
And Chief Bolton, I'm sure you work with the group SOS, Save Oakland Streets. Is that a way that we're tying that into it as well? Is that another component that's helping through the city?
It's related. I think they could probably explain more about, because they have more goals and do a lot more work than what we're touching on now. But I think the most important thing is that we've more than a couple times, we've all met as a group. We've presented things to city council, and I'm personally very proud of that working relationship.
And Lieutenant, we're talking about bus lanes. That's something new in Oakland. I know that some people use those bus lanes as express lanes sometimes. What's going on with that?
Yeah, we've seen an uptick in accidents related to the bus lane, and it's speeding. So cars will go into the bus lane, they'll speed and trying to pass other slower moving vehicles. And we've actually had a couple fatal accidents that have occurred at Seminary International and a couple serious accidents at 38th International. And that's directly related to the bus lanes. So when we do our overtime, our grant enforcement, we do put officers out there and specifically looking for bus lane violations.
People out on the street, I mean, they're seeing these problems, seeing these issues. What do you say to the residents of Oakland and the visitors to Oakland about the traffic issues?
Well, I do feel them. I do understand where they're coming from. I'm driving from East Oakland over here to the PAB, which is in West Oakland, and I have people passing me on the shoulder and going through a red light, and I understand that. But we are out there doing the best that we can with the resources that we do have available to us right now. We will be starting our new grant in November, and we'll be focusing on traffic violations, and we'll be holding drivers accountable that are doing those most dangerous violations.
Chief Bolton, anything else you'd like to say or add?
I would add that, I think we've referenced a few times that traffic safety is often brought up by community members. I know I receive my fair share of emails and phone calls about traffic safety issue. I see Acting Lieutenant Thomason is no different. There is power in working with your neighborhood, with your, within your business improvement districts, helping us determine, understanding that we have less resources than we did in the past, helping us to understand where we can make the best and biggest impact. So if you are not aware of what beat you live in or work in or visit most frequently, find out. We have online a way to enter an address, understand what police beat you live on, and then there's a linked schedule of meetings for how you can attend your neighborhood council meetings. We have an OPD representative from our patrol side and our community resource officer side. Unless there's some emergency, we are attending every single meeting. We do have the ability to, when we don't have traffic enforcement officers out there, like we've explained 100% of the time, we have the ability to isolate where some prioritized projects can be. Right now we are, again, referencing some ongoing work with community resource officers, using some former motor officers. We're going to be prioritizing where our presence and our work is most needed. Please be a part of that solution. We'd be glad to see you there.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. Going on the record, we'll do it again next month with Chief Armstrong, the second Wednesday of the month. Have a good day.